I would like to welcome you to the Metro Arts Commission Grants and Funding Committee. It's April 6, 2026 at 1:00 p.m. And I'm most grateful to you all for adding this into your agenda. Grateful for that. Metro Arts mission is to drive an equitable and vibrant community through the arts pursuant to the provisions of 2.68030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. Please take notice that decisions of the Arts Commission may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of certiorari. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the Commission. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I've already welcomed, and I wonder, Vivian, would you be able to do a roll call?
I sure can. Commissioner Lefkowitz,
I'm here.
Commissioner Jester,
Here.
Commissioner Knight,
Here.
Commissioner Wade,
Here.
Director Batchelder.
Here.
We have from Metro Legal, Kelly Woodward.
Yeah.
And then we have our Metro Arts Strategic and Initiatives Grant Manager, Jackie Hanson. And myself, Vivian Fox.
And Josiah and Chuck in the back.
And Darius, don't we give them extra copies since we have?
Hold on, because the friends are.
Okay, so I, welcome everyone. I do not see anyone here for public comment, and so I'm gonna assume that no one is signed in. Is that right, Vivian?
Yep, that is correct. We do
And,
not have any public comment here in person, and we do not have any public comment submitted in the email box.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Just a reminder to the public that we do encourage you to provide written or in-person public comment, and there is a form online. We're gonna move to C, which is approval of minutes from March 16th. And those are in your packet and were sent to you earlier as well. So I reviewed them and did not see I reviewed them, and I'm wondering if you have reviewed them or would review them and would take a motion for approval or any corrections.
I have moved to approve.
Second.
Okay, so Commissioner Jester moves, Commissioner Wade seconds. All in favor of approving March 16th minutes? Aye.
Aye,
Opposed?
The
But-
second was from-
but the second was for me.
Wait, what?
I was the second,
Oh, I'm sorry.
unless you want to be.
Okay, sorry.
Tracy's we voted.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. So the minutes from the 16th passed. We're going to move right in the name of time to action discussion items. So we are bringing back, after a good discussion in commission meeting, the grant review panelist guidelines for approval. That is our action item for today. And if time allows, we will also go over the general operating and Thrive grant guidelines review if time allows. But our priority is the grant review panelist guidelines approval. You have a thing of slides that I thought I asked for this because sometimes I like to take little notes on the slides, and I'm older and can't see. So
It's on the screen.
I'm fine. Thank you. So, Ashley and Jackie, would you like to lead us through, beginning, I guess, on the slide, the recap? I asked them to provide a recap. I went back and watched the commission meeting, and I know they did, the staff did. And so, yes, I asked them to provide a summary of our discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would pick up with that recap. We discussed a plan for having rolling panelist recruitment beginning this fall. I will add, we also are currently going to add a nomination piece in. We addressed decision-making process and the panelist selection and what that looks like on the staff side. Updated panelist question 3, and we explicitly now have named Metro Arts. Confirm the panelist rubric has been shared publicly at this point. Confirm the panelist requirement for application comments. And then confirmed panelists and staff training, also that we will be creating an additional resource guide, both for the use of applicants and panelists. And we are going to invite commissioners to observe the panelist selection. So similarly to how last year you were invited into observing the panels themselves. Because we heard that in last meeting, we wanted to address that as well. Now we can kind of look at the overview. Yep. So Ashley had prepared this in previous times last year for kind of just understanding where we are in the cycle and what we'll be looking at today. So we have the panelists as well as operating and thrive guidelines that are policy we're asking you to help us get through today. And then the process, so what we as staff will be doing operationally for each area. And then we'll move into what we want to recommend today. All right, so this is us looking at all the pieces for the community review panels. We'll talk about what I think I'm moving ahead a little bit. Yeah, this is just the agenda. We're going to go over it. We'll talk about staff side again, and then those recommendations, like I was saying before. Looking at the next slide, we will go through the eligibility criteria with you, expectation, stipend, application questions, and you do have a copy that shows all of the changes we made since last time we met.
And the changes are in red, just so you know.
They are redlined in the panelist guidelines. All right, so this, as you see, there's nothing changed there. So this is a blown up copy of what you have in the actual panelist guidelines. I won't read you these slides, but we'll go through them just for the point of, as we reach highlighted areas, we can discuss it.
The panelists don't show, the screenshots don't show the red lines here. Yeah, it's just a difference.
Gotcha.
So there's a peak.
Okay,
where it's
let's
at
go
there.
back.
Sorry, that was.
No, you're good. All right. Then, yeah, so we discussed trying to kind of add more detail to where folks could see themselves and or recommend others, since we have a nomination process this year. And so this doesn't constitute criteria. You don't have to be all of these things, but we were trying to be very descriptive in what might make people think would be relevant, aligned experience to make an excellent, thorough panelist. And do you see any other areas that were redlined in this?
No, it's just those few words that we add.
Oh, we did add our show. Yeah,
On red line, on page 1.
I gotcha. Okay. So yeah, we added some based on the conversation from last time, the cultural organizer. We also added business management in alongside, because that was requisite relevant experience when it comes to that organizational nonprofit piece. And that was something we had heard from Commissioner Cole as well. I think that's, thank you. Okay, nothing has changed here. These are the eligibility requirements we went through last time. And then likewise, there's nothing new from last time in the conflicts of interest.
One thing I got a little bit more information about this, that came up, a question came up, I think it was from Commissioner Brown about why MNPS employees cannot be a panelist. So the clarifying information that we have to add is it's actually not that they cannot be a panelist, but they cannot be paid. And so if we had allowed them, and maybe this is something that we could, have some feedback and discussion on if you want, it would say MNPS employee, may serve as a panelist, but cannot receive compensation for. And, I think that pros and cons to creating a structure where some people are paid and others aren't, can get a little messy.
It'd also be burdensome to have to take a day from a teaching day to come.
But that's clarifying information we wanted to add on that question that came up.
Thank you for that. All right, and then, so we did try to really clarify, and this goes to other questions we've had about, this is the top of page 2, what you would want to see to be true. So we mentioned kind of doing the resources, the training. We are very clearly laying out that panelists need to attend the 1-hour training, go through everything, fully commit to doing their work and submittable beforehand. And we added including entering tentative scores and brief comments and submittable. So just being really explicit about those comments, and we will do that in the training process as well. But wanting them to know on the front end. And then, of course, the 1-day, full day facilitated panel meeting.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is an hour enough for the amount of information that needs to come out in that training? That people will need to be prepared
Yeah.
with?
I think as someone that went through it last year, and we are going to make sure there's explicitly operating and there's Thrive trainings, but also it won't be the only way. We're going to do midpoint check-ins. We've added that as well this year, that we'll check in with all the panelists to make sure where they're at, and they'll know that we're going to do that, and we'll be available for any questions. So whether that looks like staying on that call, being available. I know staff was very responsive to me last year. They let us understand we could ask questions, and I did. Ask for clarification, and so it won't be the only way to learn, but it will be trying to contain that within an hour. I do think that'll be sufficient.
And the midpoint check-in is in the 2-week process.
While they're reviewing, exactly, yep. Making sure that they have what they need and that they're moving along, yep.
And I think by separating, last year was Thrive and operating panelists together, but just by nature of separating them, I feel like gives us more time for discussion with the tools specific to each group as well.
Agreed.
And I assume that whatever materials they have at the training, they will get copies of those so they can review them when they need to check on something.
And we can add things into submittable as well.
And is there one training or do they have the option of several? I'm trying to remember.
It was what?
I was wondering, it might be interesting if there was a breakout or something that they could actually know the people who might be on their panel too, if that came up, like in a discussion, but that's, that'd be interesting to
And we're
me.
definitely gonna record it. Obviously, there are breakouts that part wouldn't be, but
Right,
I
right.
hear what you're saying.
Just so they can kind of know each other.
Yeah, and to be honest, we're not fully into the weeds of like design.
No,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, just throwing it out.
I do love a good interactive and community-based activity. So, but to answer your question, I do believe that 1 hour will be sufficient, especially because we're going to provide additional support. Yeah, and resources.
Another question, after the training, well, not after the training, relative to the training. So I know it's not developed yet. This is for July. And I know you're already working on it. Will that come before the commission?
The training.
The training process, design and all of that? Or
I think
the
that-
committee?
I think that falls a little bit in the process piece,
Mhm.
but kind of to the point of y'all are welcome to come to the panels, like I, on a personal level, love talking about that kind of thing. I'm happy to do so. I don't know that we'll have that within our schedule to do in formal meetings.
So it may not need to be approved, but we could discuss it
Yes.
And see it
and see
in
it.
advance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't asking, hopefully I didn't say approved.
Okay,
But that was not what my intent was.
Just to see it.
To see what
Yeah.
it looks like.
Cool. Anthony? Thank you. Yeah, second too. All right, so as previously mentioned, the only thing added here is in the third question, per our previous discussion, we added the explicit kind of metro language into question 3. Everything else stayed the same. Right. And this is us moving into, again, kind of more of the staff side of what it's going to look like on our process this year. So in submittable, this gets to some of what you were just mentioning, we will have the application questions, the eligibility questions, and other supplemental materials. So that includes resources to help them sift, just like the applicants will have those additional resources to go along with the questions. The rubric will be visible. I know Commissioner Knight raised that question last time. It is built in there, and we have the place where they need to tell us their availability for specific dates. And then they get an automated confirmation with their next steps, knowing that, you know, they've submitted their application and we'll be reviewing it.
Question,
Mhm.
regarding the rubric, I think when we talked last week, there was some conversation about, the scoring is a 5, a 3, or a 1, or a 0. Was there conversation about adjusting what the scoring was? Or what the range for the scoring was?
Well, because this is not a process where, we know, we don't have a cutoff of how many people apply, we want to have it open as long as possible and collect as many people. There's not a minimum score you have to get to be a panelist, but we want to use those very specific things to determine who can be, but we don't know how many people we're going to have, and we hope it can be open as long as possible, and there can be folks nominated as well.
So maybe my question wasn't clear. Because I'm not asking about the number of panelists, I'm asking about the
Rubric for it.
scoring
Yeah.
0 to 5.
Yeah.
On the rubric, because part of our conversation at the last meeting was around how are we making the scoring.
Yeah, so we haven't
so
set,
different.
we haven't set a minimum score, so it's probably gonna be based on the range of.
So it's still gonna be 0 to 5. I'm talking about 0 to
Wait,
5
would
versus
you like
1
that?
to 10.
Yeah, I mean, that one I did, transparently, I used like what I've used in like the youth program quality assessment for that. But there's not a reason necessarily that it couldn't be 0 to 10. We're about to talk about the staff side of it, like that doesn't bother me to adjust that.
Yeah, and I'm not at all suggesting, I just remember from our conversation last week,
I think I was talking,
not
I
in
might
the
have been
grant
talking
committee.
about
I mean,
the, yeah,
our one-on-one.
I think we were talking about the 10 points with
Yes.
the other.
Well, and then-
application.
There also was conversation about the weighting, right? I mean, I know Commissioner Greer talked about like the weighting of different things. And to be clear, like, the reason that's not part of this is that's not technically part of the guidelines, right? But we
No.
expressed
And so I think what could
like
be,
our wish.
if commissioners would like to be present as we discuss, I know we've also talked about other decision-making pieces, we can talk more. That is something we're fully open to as staff, we discussed it, so
Yeah, my question was just, has the rubric been adjusted relative to
that scale.
0 to 5 or?
No, I kept it as 0 to 5. I think I might have misunderstood before, because I was thinking of the other guidelines that we did adjust to be 0 to 10.
Okay.
I don't mind if we adjust this,
Just asking.
yeah. That's something we can do, it's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's going into what's in the next columns here, because it's kind of part of, reviewing, so it's a good segue.
Yeah, and I think I didn't get through with her, so we may,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so then on the staff side, this again, might get into a little bit, we'll have the training, the rubric. We'll be using some tools for kind of making sure we have an equity lens in our decision making. And then we're looking at that kind of in general as staff, and some of us spent time on that Friday. There are 3 staff that will be assigned to review and score all the panel applicants. Those staff will not be myself or Ashley. And they will include ratings and comments. We will then meet with those folks. So again, you know, understanding how folks are ranked and discussed who might be selected, because we'll need tentative groups of 5 on each panel. The panelist trainings, like we previously mentioned, will be separated out for each. We'll go over the rubric, definitions, and the concepts, submittable, and the tools, go over bias, and then we also mentioned the midpoint check-in and how we'll be available throughout. Okay, so some changes we made for this year, as well as having a longer recruiting period, including the nomination. applications and panelists are, last year they were on the same timeline, that limited capacity, so we are not going to have those together this year. The longer timeline also means we'll have more staff involved in the panel review process. And then those selected panelists, also this year, we mentioned the tools and the training, and we'll have a minimum of 5 panelists. Last year was 4. The training and orientation has the improved scoring rubric. So this is where we get into the 0 to 10, the rubric they and the applicants will be using. Separate trainings for both, new resource guide, and then that midpoint we mentioned. All right, and this is where we had I know we just paused along, so we may have covered some of these, but I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Lefkowitz.
Well, I just thought one way to do this is what I do in my life, but like, if we wanted to try and move this along, thinking about, we could offer things that resonate with us about this or that seem, that we notice, and then staff, giving you the chance, if you have specific questions about things you would like us to ask, that would be great. We can ask questions to learn more, similar to the kinds of questions that have been asked, kind of like we call them non-opinioned questions in my facilitation. So just questions to help us learn more. If we have any suggestions, we can offer them, and then we can go to the recommendation. So we don't have to follow this exactly, but just kind of as a way to think. So, yes. Committee members' responses, things you notice, things that resonate with you.
I appreciate the red line document and the questions that I had based upon my very cursory review had been answered.
Yeah.
I like subject matter expertise simply because it does, in the section where it's talking about panelists and timeline, that we're making every effort to find words, thank you, and select panelists that will balance, et cetera, just because, I think it is important as we don't just say nobody applied.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough applications, that we are being intentional about going to find, enough panelists, because my assumption is that we're going to have more people applying for our same little pilot.
And there was excitement. We hadn't done grant check-ins in the previous cycle. So in those grant check-ins with We Health 19 and everyone we mentioned, we will be releasing panelist applications soon, obviously, if you're applying, but we encourage folks to share the opportunity far ahead.
Also appreciate the information, it was on the slide, talking about, the training that they're gonna get on the actual, what I believe to be based upon our questions, the training that they are the additional training, enhanced training, that they're going to get about the rubric for the scoring.
Yes.
And I don't know how much you tell them about some of the challenges we've seen in the past around how we really want to work hard with this these grant panels. Equitable, robust process, yes, and how important their job is, because
Yeah, I think
I
part of
didn't
that
meet any
too.
panelists last year. Yeah.
Comments need, and just talking about like anything, why are we doing that? You know, comments substantively help grantees make improvements, understand where they're falling on the rubric, but not just, you know, mimicking that, but kind of getting into what they would have loved to have seen, or they didn't, or that wasn't clear. And we have that pre-application period, so others applying can take advantage of that to hopefully get some clarity before they submit as well.
I appreciate the addition of the expectations, kind of related to what Commissioner Wade was talking about too. But thinking about the requirement or making explicit that they're to enter scores and comments, like to the idea that it's a robust process. And then adding the clarity about the in-person discussions, orientation. So I feel like that expectations is a great addition to the guidelines. do you all, and we can go back and forth between, do you have any questions that are specific about these guidelines? And the answer may be no, but like anything specifically that you're uncertain about or that policy wise we can provide clarity on? The answer may be no again.
I think you got into some of what I would have asked, which is where do you see that you would like there to be things further contemplated when we do the training? Which we kind of organically got into as we were going along. So that was gonna be one of my questions.
Which rubric? The panelist rubric?
You mean, so you're curious if we have thoughts about things that we want to see included in the training? Is that what you're
If
asking?
there's anything that you think would need to be clarified as we're looking at the training for panelists.
I think my response to that is to follow up on what has already been discussed, but you will probably want to offer some guidance on what makes a good comment.
Yes, definitely. I love feedback and I didn't mention that aloud, but yes, kind of building on what I was saying before. So not only why it helps people, but what are the, I kind of mentioned like not just completely regurgitating something from their answer or the rubric, but
Right.
just giving something that goes a little bit further. And so even things like saying this is a great answer, that is
Just not a good.
kind of a 0 calories type junk food answer inadvertently, right? Like it doesn't help folks. So I love that conversation and that will be specifically addressed.
It's very CRP. Not
Very, very teacher response.
Okay, do we have any questions before do we have any other questions? Do you have about anything that we need clarity on?
I have a few questions that I think are easily answered. At one point, we had discussed leaving the application process open, sort of year-round. Is there an option on here to say, click if you would like us to keep your application for future consideration? I mean, is that something we want to incorporate this time around or no?
Yeah.
That's just one thought. Is there any sort of, obviously you all, ultimately the staff will be choosing this panelist. Is there any sort of term limits? Like, can people serve every time if they have a strong application, or are we balancing it with people who have not served versus people who have served? That might be something that needs to be mentioned at some point.
I think as we do rolling applications, that does need to be contemplated, yeah.
And then one of the things felt like, and I may be wrong, I was sort of trying to replay that commission meeting and the last commission meeting and the questions that I was hearing. And one of the questions I thought I was hearing, and maybe this is wrong, was that under the panelist application questions, there seemed to be concern that there were only 3 questions there. I know that previously there was only 1, and so we've tripled that. But do you feel like these 3 questions are broad enough that they will allow panelist applicants to provide the answers that you're seeking in making your judgments?
In combination with the application.
Yes. I mean, I do, based on reviewing the information from last cycle, with anything, I think you'll get some responses that are quite brief and leave you with lots of questions about just who is this person, and you'll get others that, maximize what they're able to input. And I think, making the rubric visible will encourage people to, share what it is that we're looking for, right? Those specific details, like what the rubric references.
And that's new. We didn't have the rubric for criminals last year, so I do think knowing what you're writing to, and we talked about that a bit as staff, with a wider audience of staff about
Right.
what that might mean. And again, we talked about in the future when it's rolling, could there be, a brief interview process to kind of better determine how folks might deal with the scenario.
We talked about that.
So I just realized that I can't remember if there's an interview. There's not, it's the application. There's not an interview for the grant panelist, is there?
No, there is not.
Yeah.
I had
It's
brought
too
that
much.
as a, what do you all think several months ago?
Yeah.
We didn't end up really exploring it, especially when we just look at,
Capacity.
capacity.
Yeah.
The timeline of
Mhm.
bringing on a new person too soon.
And I would say Jackie did a lot of really helpful research, pulling together, panelist applications and guidelines from other arts
Mhm.
vendors. And it doesn't seem like that's a common thing, not that we only do
Yeah.
common things, right? But it didn't seem like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
typical.
In fact, I think we mentioned it before, but typically the first question is the only one, but because we know this is a community process, we do want people to talk about how they work with others, how they work with, people that have diverse perspectives. And then, of course, it is very relevant to know how people may have done processes like reviewing grants or other kind of relative or related.
So, Jackie, when we met last week and you were talking about the possibility of having those conversations, that's not for conversations with potential panelists.
Not for
That's
this,
not for this process, it's for
the
potential.
second one we will be doing this cycle year.
Because after the questions at, the last, commission meeting, especially relative to, now we've tripled the questions, et cetera, and we still may be leaving some information on the table,
Yeah.
depending on how people answer the questions. I will be in favor of a brief conversation, with those people to learn more about them, that doesn't end up. in
We are too. We really, as staff, have talked about that, and we would like to have that if the math was working on the calendar. I would make sure that we could, that's not unfortunately having looked just before this at the calendar of all the pieces. I don't think it's realistic, but I wish it was.
Mhm. Gotcha. I just wanted it on record.
No, it feels really important to try to have a brief conversation. Yeah, and rolling gives us an opportunity to schedule for this in a different way.
Right, I'm in
And
agreement.
check-ins.
Yes.
Also, as you potentially see very little, energy in submittable from certain panelists.
And we're preparing them to know that's coming. And I'll speak for myself as a panelist. I was not submitting because I was waiting until we discussed. That made it look for staff like I had not been working.
Yeah.
Whereas I was much further along. And so just explaining things like that, but preparing them to know that we're gonna check in at the midpoint, so it won't be being that surprise. Yeah.
I think that's great, and I think, to that point, those check-ins too could involve some of those kinds of scenario questions or like, questions that could be more specific about different kinds of
A
scenarios.
little more probing.
Yes, a little more probing, exactly.
Making sure that everybody's clear on what they're.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Opinions or suggestions on the part of, I think we've given a lot of these, but anything else before we let the staff give us the recommendation?
And to recap, I'll take the rubric up to 10 for this as well, 0 to 10, and we will add on submittable, Sean, the question about interest in future work as a panelist.
What was your first statement, Jackie?
I will add the panelist rubric 0 to 10 on this as well.
As potential for later. Gotcha.
Well, yeah, I can do it. So I'll make that in.
I was just asking a question. It was
Oh,
not
no,
a
no.
recommendation.
It's honestly
so-
not a big. It's not.
Because
I don't think it's a big change.
Yeah, it's not. I will make
you'll
it.
get a lot of sixes and.
There will be a staff of three contemplating, and then Ashley and I will figure that with some of you there, so.
I guess I would want to say too, in the future, thinking about the MNPS, this just occurs to me. I'm wondering if in the future, again, it could be explored. I don't know if it would be legal to have like an exchange or like this could be professional service or, sometimes there are things like that have to happen. There's service that has to happen on the part of so if there was no compensation, but it would be helpful to participate in the process. I mean, it's also could be potentially a resume builder or like a valuable process, right?
I mean,
So,
Teachers want to learn others.
well, and university, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the same in college versus public schools, but we are required to do public service
Exactly.
of different kinds or service to the profession, so this ticks both boxes.
yeah.
Yeah, except for the reality, maybe this year's timeline is summer, so it might be different, but going forward, it's
Yeah.
probably gonna be interruptive of like,
Sure, school days.
those of us that have been in K-12.
But they might get professional development too. This is just,
Yeah,
that's a
for other
push,
times.
push the discussion.
Yeah, I'll
forward,
just say,
but
I'll pin it
I do
because,
think
I'm so
some of the
passionate.
most effective advocates for our teachers in schools. So if there was a way to open it to them, even if in a compensation challenge,
and I know
that's future.
Commissioner Jester is needing to go soon.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I just want to make sure
Okay.
before he has to depart.
Staff, including those kinds of recommendations and thoughts, is that your recommendation that we approve? We move to
Yeah.
motion. So I would call for a motion, and then if we have any, we've already had a lot of discussion, but we can have discussion after that and vote. So here's the motion that we thought of for this with the changes that have been made.
I move we approve the FY twenty-seven grant panelist guidelines with the changes that have been specified by staff.
Second.
Second, any more discussion? Cool. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Excellent. Thank you so much. Anything? And these have been approved and will go back to the commission for, is that next week? Next week. All right. Now, in terms of thinking about what we want to get through, the next item is not an action item. We're not going to vote on these today because we're coming back next week for a longer discussion. So in that sense, is it okay if Commissioner Jester has to split? That's
You'll
not-
have everywhere we're going.
Yeah, you'll know where we're going. We thought just to kind of make next meeting, go smoothly, that we would, ask the staff to go through both of the guidelines, and, we wanted to be able to go through both of them. And then we can have discussion, we can have more discussion next week, but that would just get us further along. Is that cool? Yeah, okay. So we're moving now to 27. And, we're going to, staff is going to do an overview of operating. You have highlighted copies that talk about the new information. We'll have discussion as time allows, and then the recommendation at the next committee meeting. So this will help us just digest this, give it some time. So let's do it.
Yeah, I'll talk about the approach and then Ashley is gonna walk us through the changes. So, all right. So we talked about wanting to prioritize clear and predictable information about the schedules for where we are in the cycles and when folks can expect their payments. We wanted to address consistency in application scores. So thinking about the scoring rubrics, which, as you know, there are some adjustments, the number of panelists, the panelist recruitment, like we discussed, creating additional ways to share artistic work based on feedback we received, and then providing more thorough information about the fiscal sponsor artist relationship, and then Metro's requirement of that fiscal sponsorship. So we also hear that as well and want to make sure that we are as thorough as possible.
So I think I will take the next few slides. And so what you have printed, let me tell you what you have. The electronic version that we sent you all last week of the guidelines did not have anything highlighted or redlined in it. You expressed a desire for the red lines at the last meeting, but by the time we were done, it had become almost unreadable.
Yeah.
because we moved things around, we clarified language throughout. And, what we did instead today is just highlighted substantively different things. So we did not highlight, sentences where, they were just moved or, where language was clarified or tightened up, but we thought that the highlights will bring, attention to the things that we'll touch on in this overview. So, I'll do operating, and then I think Jackie will do Fry, but we'll have time in between them for discussion. All right, so if you go to the next slide, and you can walk through with the printed copy in front of you. But the first thing that we'll highlight is the grant eligibility criteria for operating. So again, these are our arts organizations. We did not change any of the criteria about who is eligible to apply. What you'll see highlighted is a statement that the organization must be active and in good standing with the state. This is not new. We check this in the contracting phase, and we cannot actually execute a contract if the paperwork with the state is out of date. So by just explicitly naming here, I think it can help us be a little more proactive, because every year there's about probably 10% of applicants that we address this at that point. So it's just stating it more clearly up front. If you go to the next slide related to criteria, we did add, well, I guess we did make some changes to criteria. These are organizations that cannot receive an operating grant. What we've added is what's highlighted here. So MNPS affiliated booster clubs or other organizations whose primary purpose is to support government agencies. So we've always had in the guidelines that friends of organizations, like Friends of the Metro Park, are not eligible. But what we saw in the last cycle was other types of groups, like the one named here, that were applying, that we felt were in the same type of primary mission as friends of groups. And so we've added that clarity here based on decisions that we made last year. And then at the bottom, we added organizations whose primary purpose or activities involve religious practices or intent as organizations that are not eligible to apply. We have no changes to allowable expenses for operating. They're meant to be flexible, and they will sort of remain in these flexible categories that are not exhaustive, but provide examples of what grant funds can be used for. Go to the next slide. What we've added here is a little bit more clear language about what to expect for the time frame in a grant cycle. And so this is on page 5 of the printed guidelines. We're using language that says, if awarded, payment disbursement can be expected to begin in October. Of course, that is upon timely submission of things that are required on the grantee side. And we went ahead and chose a date that proposed grant activities should not begin earlier than October 1st. What's different about this from the last cycle is that we used just language of when your contract is signed. I felt that this was important to put in there because we got inquiries, our event that we want to have is on October 3rd. Am I eligible or am I not eligible? And so part of this will be communications on the side of ours. We believe that by October 1st, all the contracts will be signed, and we'll make it clear that grantees are probably not going to have their, funding in the bank by that time. But because the contract will be signed, it will be eligible to occur or incur expenses around that. But we did not have a specific date in the past guidelines. Hopefully I'm explaining that clearly. If you go to the next slide, we are not proposing changes to the micro, small, medium, etc. There's a lot of discussion to be had around this, but what we have added here is clarity about what kind of potential revenues or dollars are counted in how these annual amounts are calculated. So we've had clarity that endowment funds, in-kind contributions, and capital fundraising campaigns do not count toward operating expenses. And those, again, are based on questions that we received in the last cycle. So there's now guidance around it. If you go to the next slide, you did. What we've just added here is a link to see the previous year's operating grant awards. We talked about different ways that we can better, or we talked about the pros and cons of changing these dollar amounts, but decided ultimately not to change what these aspirational amounts are right now, because that really opens the conversation for changing the funding formula, and that's not what we're doing this year. So what we ended up doing instead was just linking people to see the award amounts last year. And as we're developing informational materials like the FAQs and how we talk about and promote the grants, we'll incorporate that language around, you can assume grant sizes will be around these sizes if selected, but we chose not to put those amounts in writing here. Here is the dates that will be included in the draft guidelines. This is based on our, run through of when panels will fall, when commission meetings will fall, and our commitments to certain actions after commission meetings. On the staff side, we have a much more detailed work plan, that ends up coming into what you see here, but this is really based on activities by the week being planned out through October. Go to the next slide. Something new that we're adding here are formal information sessions. And so we decided to, in the guidelines, advertise when these meetings will be virtual and an in-person one. And that if people are unable to attend these information sessions, the same information will be recorded on a live video or not live, a recorded video that'll be on the Metro Arts website. So this is really a walkthrough of the guidelines for applicants, a walkthrough of the resource guide that applicants will have about preparing their application, a walkthrough of their criteria, etc. The next slide shows the preliminary review. We've talked about this before, and Jackie mentioned it already in some of the explanation of other questions that have come up, but we've identified a date that is 4 weeks after the application opens and 3 weeks prior to the final deadline, that for all applicants who submit their application by that time will get a review by staff. It's the same thing that we do in the technical review. At the final deadline, you're reviewed for eligibility, and they will be contacted by Metro Arts to confirm eligibility, to ask questions, and to provide some feedback from us on the staff side. So that's really something that is intended to make sure that nobody is getting disqualified for preventable things and can have the opportunity to put together the strongest application. There's several sections that we did not make any substantive changes. They're listed here on the slide, but funding approvals, how we do notifications, disbursements, check-ins, etc. If you go to the next slide. This is in the section on what does good standing mean. We've just added this last line that grantees must notify Metro Arts of any active investigations, reviews, criminal or civil or other misconduct proceedings. Legal, I think, is going to help us tweak this language a little bit. This has just come up in the bigger metro world that we live in, that we want to make sure if any of these things are happening that we're informed of it so that we can have conversations as needed with grantees. And so that brings us to the really substantive part that I think we'll probably have the most conversation about in the guidelines, which is the questions. And so what we have shown here are the 7 required scored questions that applicants must answer. So what I mean by scored is that they're scored, right? The application in submittable includes other information, you know, what is the mission of your organization? What is your budget size, et cetera. So these are the scored questions. And I think what we can do, well, go to the next slide as well. The questions go hand in hand with the rubric, right? So we've written this, what we call improved language about the rubric, that will guide panelists to ultimately the score that they select. And it says that the applicant's response doesn't have to fully match what the rubric says, but that they are tools to guide you in determining what number you're going to score each question for. And explicitly saying scores less than 7 should reflect a response to the question that is less than adequate. So that's additional guidance there. And the last slide, I got 2 more slides. The rubric, this is, Jackie has referenced this already, but last year for the last 3 years, the rubric has been on a 1, 2, 3, 4 point scale. We have changed the rubric to a 0 to 10 scale. The rubric was previously using descriptors like fair to outstanding, and instead we have changed those to does not meet criteria to exceed criteria along with that numeric scale. We've added greater detail to the rubric descriptions, and like we said, a resource guide will be available. The resource guide includes things like definitions, concepts, considerations for when you're drafting your response. That's a tool that's going to be helpful to the grantee as well as to the panelists. And if you go to the next slide, this is just one side by side, and then I think we'll look at the materials that you have printed, but one side by side of the same question in last year's rubric and this year's rubric. So the question just in this example says, what is the impact of your organization's work? That was previously all that both the applicant and the panelists received, along with this very brief, fair through outstanding description. This year, they have this greater detailed description criteria with the numeric choices along with it, and the resource guide will provide tips for how you think about impact, right? Because impact doesn't look the same for every organization or every project. So it'll provide guidance around how to think about impact, and you have the specific guidance in the rubric, right? If you want to score a 9 to 10, the response should include a strong description of community and participant benefits and artist benefit, right? Along with these other things that the exceeds criteria category says. So I think maybe what's helpful, and then I'll pass it to Jackie to add, is this that you have in your packet. This is the cover letter that we sent, I believe last week with one meeting packet. If you go to page 2, this is the questions from FY26 to the questions that we're proposing for this year. So you can see exactly what changed from them. And our intent was to keep the same meaning really behind the questions. We did not go through a community informed and community engaged process about what questions should we be asking. But what we did is change language to make it more clear, and then improve the rubric by making it real clear how to score well on that question. So I believe if in your operating guidelines, if you go to page 13, you'll see the rubric for each question. And Jackie, do you want to say, obviously, anything about what I just said, but like potential tweaks that might be in here?
So we talked with staff too. They were very generous in helping us we've been trying to do our best to kind of anticipate what might not be clear, what could be wordsmithed. So there has been some wordsmithing that has happened since these screenshots, but I know like Capri's in the room, thank you, others on staff helping us kind of clarify some of that language. So if you notice something slightly different in wording, we were doing that to make it as legible as possible. Same spirit of the question as Ashley mentioned. There is a 0 this year. I noticed as a panelist last year, there were the need for a distinction between if someone just did not answer a question, like if they wrote NA, that's a 0, right? But a difference between that and something being answered in a way that was maybe seen as less complete, so that should be on the 1 to 10 scale. But you should see in there, like, again, trying to make that more descriptive, helpful to both the applicants and the panelists in knowing what they're putting forward and how it should line up. And we are continuing, the draft guidelines are out, so we're continuing to ask folks, and I know we've put out even some direct asks and shared things with past applicants. You know, it's out to everybody, so we welcome any kind of thoughts on what might still not be as clear as we can make it, knowing that, you know, we're still gonna be continuously working on this over time.
Can I ask a question? On the slide about the scoring rubric, where the total possible point 70, and the last sentence, scores less than 7 should reflect a response to the question that is, oh, less than adequate. Now I read it aloud, I understood
And
it.
it could just say that does not meet the criteria, but yes, it's,
Yeah, I misread it. I thought it was saying that the person who was doing the scoring, if it was below a certain point, that they would have to provide justification.
oh no, we want them to do regardless, but they,
Yeah.
but that's how it was last year, right?
Yeah.
As well,
Yeah.
the overall
Mhm.
70.
Once I read it out loud, I got it.
No worries.
Mhm.
I think that does not meet the criteria.
We can do
Yeah,
that language.
Yeah, I think we can improve the.
Yeah,
criteria.
I think it can just match what it says, which is, that does not meet criteria.
Mhm.
No.
Well, we can, if you all are finished with this part, we can discuss and just talk about things that resonate with us about this.
Well, I included just because it came in today. Jackie just said we've been doing some targeted outreach to get feedback about this. So I included an email that came in just a couple of hours ago with, you know, somebody who had a less than great experience in this process last cycle. And so we asked for their feedback and we see it here. So you have that to read. There's that.
The very back of your.
Yeah, the emails.
Should be at the very last one.
It's just a lot of paper.
If you don't have it. I was gonna say, oh, here, look
We
at
can have mine.
it. That's a. I read it.
There, thank you.
I think we only printed this.
Okay.
Does anybody need my, I don't need your copy.
Got it.
I'm gonna get this back.
All right, anybody else?
And this was sent out on our email listserv to 8,000 people last week.
Right, and so so I'm appreciative of the fact that it was sent out and posted, right, so that people have the opportunity to,
This was sent out.
The guidelines.
guidelines.
With big draft watermark program.
Gotcha.
I definitely, as somebody who makes rubrics all day long, not all day, but a lot, I do, think that the, language or the change in the rubric is, very helpful in clarifying both for the applicant and for, people, who are applying. So just thinking about, in particular, like the word impact. I remember in the panels last year, there was some, like, what is, you know, I remember hearing some discussion about that and the way people were talking about impact. So just to like quantify it and say what it is actually is very helpful. And so I'm very appreciative of the changes in that, I think. The resource guide is, also, I think, a helpful tool. And yeah, I think that would be helpful for me to see, just in terms of you were talking about having definitions and concepts and things like that, that we could all be familiar with as well.
Under review process, it says not all reasons for technical denial will be able to be corrected. Would they be able to be corrected if they were discovered in the preliminary review period?
Yes,
So people have an option
Yes.
to get their materials in early.
presuming it can be corrected.
Yeah.
Right. If
Within the bounds of.
if I decide to apply as Belmont University for an operating grant, that's not gonna happen.
Well, but can I think of an example from last year, like maybe, I think there was some kind of situation where someone applied in the wrong category, right? And so in that situation, they weren't able to correct that because they'd done the whole application, right? But in this, if they had applied to the wrong size 3 weeks before the deadline, they might find that out and would have time to submit in the right category. Is that correct?
Yes, and one thing, I'm glad you said that because I omitted in my explanation of what is different, that we are recommending that everybody answers the same questions this year. And so last year it was 5 questions if you're in this size and 7 questions if you're in that size. We are recommending that all applicants answer all 7 questions. You know, the questions that smaller organizations did not answer were things like planning. Every organization plans, no matter what size you are. They're conversations that we've had in the check-in meetings, like people have something to say to them. I think it was, you know, with the intent of not overburdening people with an overly long application. But, you know, through conversation, we are making the recommendation that everybody answers all the same questions. So that is the 7 questions instead of some based on what size category you're in.
And to follow up, they would be evaluated too with other, like if it's micro and they're all answering those 7, they're evaluated with other micros, right? So that's different from like their answers
Yeah.
not being.
And we tried to write it in
Yeah.
such a way that, you know, and it was like that before. If you don't have this, like we know we've had some people tell us in the check-ins that part of what they use their general operating support grant for was to hire someone to do strategic planning because they're trying to expand their capacity. And so just knowing, like Ashley mentioned, from the check-ins, that's something people are already substantively contemplating, and it's something they have to do. So, yeah, giving them a chance to score on that as well.
Do you all have any specific questions? Things here?
I would just note that the most updated from staff feedback, wordsmithing of the questions is in this overview document. So take a look there for the question wording for this year.
I mean, I guess maybe, I know I just did a quick run through, but if there's anything that you like really was hoping would be changed or addressed this year, that's not, I think that's helpful for us, whether it's, you know, maybe something we talked about or maybe something we didn't think about yet.
And we can tell you our thinking of why, for some of it, maybe we're looking at, you know, we're in this 3rd year of using the spirit of these grant guidelines, right? So we're trying to think ahead as well, but we can kind of peel back our thinking more too.
I'm grateful that you changed the artistic risk-taking question, because while I know what that's going for, I feel like the substitute is very helpful. And again, I think that was another question that was just not clear to some people, so I feel like there's a lot of clarity. I also am glad that I was hoping that they would be required to upload some materials. So the requirement to upload up to 5 photos is nice, and the ability to submit a video or something else in lieu of having them present, right, at a panel just provides them more opportunity. But then also understanding that not everybody, that's an optional thing, that not everybody has to do that, or yeah, so I like the ability to upload more things. The writing is required, right? They are not able to record answers.
For operating, it's all written.
And the resource guide is available and submittable at the time that they apply.
Well, I think it's gonna be more robust than the whole thing being in submittable. So, it'll be like a PDF on the website, but we will make
Have a link.
constant.
You'll get it at the time that they.
You could click on it, yeah, you could click on that link within submittable to open that in a
To get it.
separate tab, yeah, exactly, but I think what you're saying is like, it won't be like integrated in with the question, the rubric, yeah, 'cause that would just get.
That's what I meant, not as a part of that, but there's access to it
Exactly,
and submittable when they submit.
yes, exactly, so you can have that opened alongside. And we know our heads are in it, but they're gonna go to do this and they're gonna want everything there. So, yeah.
This is a comment. I'm wondering about the training, just as we go forward, but like, I guess I'm thinking about the uploading of additional materials, making it clear to the panelists, in terms of like, if somebody submits a video and somebody else doesn't, that is not, we don't get more points for the video. Just
Yeah.
is the video is another way to provide the information, right? So in terms of thinking about, I think it makes it more accessible in terms of thinking about writing and what you're trying to show and present, but that if you don't do something optional.
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
penalized.
And that, the spirit of that question scoring is, more explicitly captured in the rubric.
Yeah.
And so, but that gives you a chance if you're like, I would rather record maybe some folks that are involved in this work.
Yeah,
Talking
exactly.
about it, you can do so, but you won't be
Yeah.
penalized. And again, getting at the spirit of, you may not be able to be present.
Yeah.
But you could passionately advocate. So it's like, if you were like, I wanted to be able to give that pitch of what our organization does, this gives you an option to do so. Great.
I do think, your point, Heather, is important because, depending again on the size of the organization and the capacity.
Yeah.
Being able to do a video, even if it's just speaking and all of those things may not be a possibility. And
Yeah.
so reminding panelists and applicants that doing it or not does not affect your score.
That spirit is all encapsulated there
Yeah.
and really, I mean, these are important distinctions we definitely will continue to make, but it also, we really try to be careful about what we included, what was optional, wasn't, how much it was maybe putting a burden or not. And then again, like, because you don't have to do it, because if we tried to require everybody to do that 2-minute video, but this for the folks that are like, I really just want to be able to say it in my own words, you now have an option to do so.
And this came mostly from applicants that ended up being denied,
Yeah,
that said,
exactly.
I wish I could have done, right? So like, that's
Mhm.
largely where I feel like our work would have been better understood had. I do want to just time check because we want to get through Thrive
Yeah.
and we've got next week still, so.
Yeah, exactly.
If I do a deeper dive into this and have thoughts, questions, do you want me to reserve those for our next meeting or send them ahead of the meeting?
If you're able to send them ahead, that way if it requires us to, or if it would be helpful for us to like bring some additional information, but we can.
Whatever's easiest for you. If you want to do comments on the email copy from Vivian and send, or, if you want to put it all in an email, whatever makes sense for you would be fine.
Okay. So we want to move to Thrive?
All right, y'all, let's do it. Let's do our Thrive flyover. Guidelines. Okay. So, like Ashley was saying before, just like based on feedback, what we want to make explicit, we know with Thrive Project grants, it's been important to talk about, everything connects back to the mission of Metro Arts, and we are arts focused. And so making sure that what you put forward in your proposal directly does support those arts. And then we included that definition. What we include as art, which appears elsewhere in Metro Arts language, right? So we just included it here to be extra explicit about that. Going forward, we've got, again, explicitly that you have to, we had some conversation, I know, in this committee and elsewhere about what that looks like with a lead artist and or a project lead. So writing it that way to say, you need to make sure you do identify one, and that's been true too, but again, just explicitly stating it this way. And then trying to contemplate some of the types of Thrive applications we've seen, right? So sometimes it's an individual artist, artist collective, or a nonprofit. We've had those possibilities mentioned in the past. We added the same language in the operating that came from what was already in existence in our guidelines around the good standing. So we just pulled that over here as well into eligibility, but that has existed previously, just trying to, again, be really clear on what is or is not eligibility versus like a preference. Okay, looking at, again, some of the things we've had to contemplate in the past and questions we get from applicants, potential applicants, delineating that if you are an executive level paid staff and you are receiving a support grant in one of the previous 2 fiscal years, you would not be eligible to also apply for a Thrive grant. And so trying to think about, you know, questions and concerns we've been receiving and how to make sure that we have that contemplated in the guidelines. And then the same as what Ashley already explained about the spirit of like supporting government agencies and the primary religious purpose as it appears elsewhere.
Yeah.
Ellis,
Next level.
is this executive level and or paid staff, or is it like executive level paid staff? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Not like,
It is both. It is saying you could be, if you're executive level, but your organization is not yet at the level of paid. And I think we had talked about like full-time.
I guess I was thinking if it's,
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking like if it's a paid staff member,
Like a
but they're
program
not.
manager.
Yeah, but not an,
Not exec.
not exact.
Executive
They could
level
apply.
who is paid.
Executive level who is paid.
We
Yeah.
might need to
Yeah.
wordsmith
Just
that to
executive.
be
level,
explicit.
Not,
Yeah.
That is
I
what we were, that was the
Yeah.
spirit, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, that's cool.
But we can clarify that for sure. And I think right as I was saying it, I was already, I was like, we gotta get back to this one. To be really explicit of what we mean there. So thank you for that. Let's look at the next one. Okay, so as we mentioned, we know this is something that we also want to make sure is explicitly more thoroughly contemplated in the resource guide. But while we cannot, formally advise on it, we want to make sure we're really thorough in what we give people for what they might be working out. Because Metro requires fiscal sponsorship, these are the criteria that go along with that. And so again, just being really explicit about what people need to know, including not just folks that need to have fiscal sponsorship, but those who would potentially be working as a fiscal sponsor. We've heard feedback from folks just wishing they had some more kind of explicit understanding of what that would look like. So that is the spirit of these additions. All right, and again, just adding that very explicit language about the arts again, first and foremost. And then we added that the project must be independent of core organizational programming of organizations that receive general operating. So again, things that have come up in the past and that needed to be specifically or that we thought would be helpful to explicitly state for everybody to understand. And again, if there are questions, we're going to encourage folks pretty explicitly during pre-application to make sure they come to us. Like if you feel like you're falling in one of these categories and you're unsure, and we're already. So this one again is going towards, if you're getting operational support, that is its own bucket. And so these projects need to not be in that same bucket. We have more interest than funding. All right, ineligible projects, this is all new. So we are trying to, again, just be really explicit about questions that have come to us, things that we have seen maybe elsewhere that we think are also relevant to what we have elsewhere in our guidelines. So if you have primary purpose of workforce or career development, what that says and what that does not say. So you can be, for example, working with other artists in a way that might support the work that you're trying to do as artists. But if you are someone proposing a project that is not arts focused and is career and workforce, that's gonna be outside the bounds of what a Thrive grant is. Similarly, this is not language we had, but it's something just to be explicit about, like, this cannot be a project that would be in support of scholarly research, so you cannot have this fund used in that way. And if your primary purpose is fundraising, so you can do that, but it cannot be your primary purpose, so we have it articulated elsewhere about what is within those bounds. And then the maintenance of public artwork, because we know what it takes for that to be maintained and approved in other ways, that is outside the scope of a Thrive grant. And similarly, outdoor murals in terms of maintenance, et cetera. All right. Next, we have added, because we've received some questions around this, we put training and professional development activities. I think this goes back to Commissioner Lefkowitz's basket weaving example, not to exceed 10% of requested amount.
Good example.
You could, if it was related to your proposed Thrive project around that, right? And then contingency funds, that's another one we received questions about, so not having anyone exceed $500 in their proposal. All right, still flying. Vivian, mind hitting it? Okay, same as Ashley said, disbursement, just trying to give people an idea of what within this current grant timeline we're in, some expectations to know what to prepare for on their capacity. All right. And likewise, the schedule you've seen. Information sessions, I think this is important to go to the next, please, Vivian. We have tentatively scoped those out, knowing again that those would be recorded and that you would be, of course, especially encouraged to attend if this is new for you. But those will be recorded so that they'll be available on our website for others to visit and or refer back to. Preliminary review, same as with operating, we are really excited that we can have that, and we are going to continue in our communications to encourage folks that are new and or that maybe there's some question of eligibility. We want to have those conversations in advance, and we want to make sure that, especially if you're not sure, that you are submitting within those first 4 weeks. Same as before, no changes in these sections, although I will say we are including the closeout report, making it available at the onset, so you can, beginning with the end in mind, we will be including that. And same as before, if you're looking back at the handout with the justifications, you can see kind of that question side to side from this year to last year. Again, keeping the spirit of what was offered in the past, but adding some clarity, additional guidance again in the resource guide. And I might just pause and give a moment in case anybody wants to take a look.
We want,
Yeah, I was about to say, I have one comment. I would
please go.
So if you see on the third application question, what we did was took the second part of the first original question. Even in making the rubric, it was getting hairy. It was just clear that there was too much combined into that one question. And so we separated it out to where the first question they'll see is about what's being proposed and what would be supported with the funding, with key activities, and then also asking them to describe, is this new or ongoing work? And then the third question now became more specifically intended outcomes. You might mention that in passing in your first question, but explicitly, we are going to score on that third question for what are your intended outcomes, how would communities, which we will be talking about more in the resource guide, benefit from and or be impacted by the project, and then include information about what success looks like for your project and how you will know if your project is successful. Again, success and your outcomes can look really different for different people. And so making sure that applicants and panelists have some contemplation of how that could look a little bit different depending on how you define it. And then same as before with and that should say 0 to 10 point scale. But it's the same as instead of the 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a 0 to 10 point scale with the does not meet to exceeds. And we'll have those considerations for them, especially for things that, words like communities and impact that none of us can explicitly, I hope, define, or if you can, please come talk to me, because I've been curious for years. And giving people as much room as possible to think about considerations and what that might mean to them, which might mean something different to another person applying. And if you're one of my friends in this world, you're probably sick of me asking you to tell me what you think impact means. And if any of you are listening, sorry, and I will keep going.
That's why I spell it out.
Yeah, to the extent that one can. All right, this is a good spot to pause. You kind of see that same build out that we shared in operating, but Commissioner Lefkowitz, would you like to take us to the discussion?
Well, yeah, just thinking about things that resonate. I'm curious if you all have specific questions. And then we can go to questions as well. Some of my comments are the same as last time, like I do appreciate the change in the rubric and the specificity of it, the way it defines impact. And I do appreciate the dividing of this application question, because that was one of my things last year. I felt like it was too large.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I didn't even know that happened, but when you build
Well, it was
out a
just in my
rubric,
brain.
you're like, it's just not working.
Yeah.
Too
So,
much.
Makes for more points, which is good when
Yeah.
there's such competition as well.
exactly.
And you were already being asked to provide it, so you could look at, if you are someone who's thought about it before, you can still save the spirit of what thinking you did.
Is the Thrive project to be completed? So this is not just funding that starts a project, or it could be.
It could be. So it's that, if you even look at that, like that first question, what we proposed, it says, describe the key activities that would take place during this grant period, including whether this
Got
project
it.
is new or ongoing. So we're kind of thinking of it and encouraging folks again, like, if this is a chapter in a larger work, you need to describe the chapter that would take place before June 30th of 2027. And if it's, emergent or smaller scope, then, same kind of time constraints, but you might be talking about it differently.
I've recently applied for artistic grants elsewhere, obviously. And a word that keeps coming up a lot is producibles. And I don't know if that's a term we want to use anywhere in here in terms of, for this particular funding, what do you anticipate being the producible? What is only beginning in that process, just to get a little more specifics out of that. Because I think in general, it will help artists perceive what their schedule and their plan is in realistic terms, because sometimes we artists love to dream,
Yeah.
right? And so a word as tangible as that can sometimes help people give a specific thought to those things.
I think a little bit the spirit of that is in things like key activities.
I agree.
And then intended outcomes,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Wait, and you use the word chapter. I've seen before in other, like thinking about a whole book and then a chapter of a book. So if this is the chapter of the book, what is that chapter? If we're Dickens, we're mailing it out, whatever.
We have 2 film projects that we funded this year that I think are good examples of what y'all are talking about. So one is called Chipping Away. It's a much larger film project that's not done in this grant period, but the deliverable, the producible was a number of community screenings of 10-minute segments. If you came to the Thrive celebration, we had one in the back room there. Another one is another film project called The Mink Slide, which is about the uprising in 1946 Columbia, Tennessee against you know, some police and racial violence. And that's a film that is still ongoing, but they did a table reading of it. So they brought in actors to read through and bring to life the script, right? So neither of those films are complete, but those were like how they said what, because it's gonna have that like
Producibles.
community.
Yeah.
Were clearly defined and they were.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think
great
those
too
are
for-
great examples that,
And it's great for works in progress because so many of these, especially for helping artists develop their work, right? These are works in progress. And so events like that can help people get the feedback that they
Yeah.
need in order to advance the work.
Yep.
which I think is
And that might be another kind of like resource guide thing of like, maybe think about this as a, you know,
Mhm.
but things like that would be hard to capture maybe in a question, but they're
Mhm.
indicative of our thinking about like what we want to help people have to think about it, so.
I have a question about the slide when it's talking about proposal requirements. The proposed project must be independent of core organizational programming of organizations that receive general operating support grants.
yeah,
So I am thinking about something specific, I'll say, but I'll change the details.
Yep.
So,
That's what
you know, I can't do that, but someone who has been paid by the organization, so has a relationship with the organization, but let's say is writing a play or doing a work or something. And like if the core programming of this organization is like theater or performance, right? Would that fall under that? Because I do think there is a role for like seeding things, kind of similar to films, for someone who's affiliated, so I don't
We
wanna
talked,
get
yeah,
too
no, we
weeds,
talked
but
about
like,
that, we tried to write it as like core organizational programming, right? So
Core.
if if you're treating something as an experiment and you already have relationships that you're building off of, we're not trying to make it to where people are, cut out entirely, and we know that we have to be clear about this because it comes up, and because, Thrive is increasingly competitive too, so
Mhm.
saying what it is and wasn't what it is not. But yeah, the core organizational programming part is like, you know, if your org, say, I'm just making something up, like says in your mission that it's to put on 2 plays every year and someone applies for a Thrive grant to put on one of those 2 plays, like that's not gonna be a Thrive grant, right? Like that would be something that someone would need to
okay,
apply for operating to do because it's part of core operating.
but if they're writing a script for a play, right?
They
That
wanna
might
try to-
one day be, but not in this year, and it's not, you know, part of, but like as a development thing.
That's, you know, again, that sounds like saying that's like their project. It's in the spirit of maybe what they do. And we thought about that, like what people do as their day job, particularly if you're in the artistic creative community. Most folks do have other work and a lot of it is aligned. And so trying to be careful about that, but also be mindful of like not having things that are really operating. support living
absolutely.
and Thrive.
I think I see it more like as seeding things, and then a lot of times people have, what do you call those, 1099 relationships a little bit, so they're not staff, they have other
Yeah.
jobs, but they have like a affiliation, right,
Yeah.
with something.
Yeah.
But, and I mean, it could be too that someone else just might act as their fiscal sponsor as well, right? Just, they don't even need to mention the organization, I guess, but I don't know. I know,
so, I mean, I would add with increasing Thrive, but it is a policy question, right? So what we're saying is, because, so how do you think about like a partnership
yeah,
that could be perceived in a certain way, right? But if so a Thrive project is supposed to be, you know, an independent of an
Yeah.
organization that receives funding, right? If it's hard to tell from the application, then we hope that they're gonna like ask us. But with increased competition, we are trying to,
yeah,
the way it's written, we are trying to maybe say this organization already receives
yeah.
funding from the
Well, should we
charter.
just say that? Because I also had a question about that bullet,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So that bullet is a little convoluted,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and not clear.
Yeah.
And so if it is simply saying, if that joker got operating funds, don't apply for your Thrive Grant here.
Mhm.
That,
To do all
Is
your
there-
work with the
yes,
organization.
is there a clearer way to say,
Yeah,
if it's operating, this Thrive does not connect there, should not connect there, there's a clear separation. Just because the way that's written, and as I've listened to the descriptions, I'm still not quite clear
Well, and it's,
how an artist would then.
Hard.
it is, and it is tough because the other thing is you might be working at an organization that receives operating support, but you want to work on a project that is not
that's what I'm.
part of that for organization. So we're trying to get the spirit of that. So any suggestions welcome, but
Well,
that's, you know, we don't want to cut people out.
And also for artists, we want to, okay, I know that, not to problematize even more, you know, like, independent artists often have a lot of relationships with different arts organizations, and that's really key to the way that
Yep.
they make
And
art,
survival.
the way they find venues, the way they, get feedback on their work, you know, all of
Yeah.
that. So I think I'm with, Commissioner
Yeah.
Wade in terms of maybe working this, like thinking, I'll think too this week, but like thinking about a way to have the spirit of it be supporting the individual artists, but not penalizing them for having relationships with
No,
organizations.
it's, the intent is not, so
Yeah.
yeah, clarifying that that's not an ecosystem question or penalizing that, but that is a, please don't propose a core operational, like, program as a Thrive Grant.
Yeah, and I don't know if this could even go in the resource guide, but like thinking about examples, what that might be, like,
Yeah.
proposing a play, right? Like you said, it was one of 2 plays to be done that year. Okay, I see that. Writing a play, you know, that, you know, may or may never, you know, have anything to do with this organization, even though you're affiliated with it, might be different, might be, I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe having some scenarios with.
Yeah, like if it's
helpful.
things that would not be happening had the artist not received external funding to bring an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
And
That's good.
the work and the creative.
So the work is not
Right.
supported by the organization at all.
If this
right?
fund
And
wasn't received, this wouldn't still take place.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree, like thinking about.
Wordsmithing is,
It's,
I think that we can.
And I don't know if it will be necessary to add an optional question that would ask them to clarify that relationship.
Yeah, so you don't have it here because it's not a scored question, but we're working on the bones of the submittable application. And there is a question about what partners are involved in this. And, you know, in the past, it's just been asked open without any like structure for like what partnerships are worth mentioning, right? So we're working on clarifying why we're asking that and having people submit, you know, 1 to 2 sentences about the role of that partnership, right? Because that's related to this too.
Yeah.
That's just not a scored
To
question.
further delineate, and for yourself, like if you're looking at the proposal requirements and then you're looking at the application on submittable, you might see, oh, okay, I have a chance to explain how this is separate from this org.
Yeah, and related to that, and I don't know if this is all the same question or something else, but one of the things that I personally had some sort of little suspicions of in the last couple of rounds is I would see people with fiscal sponsors who receive Thrive grants, and I felt like the work that was proposed for their Thrive grant benefited the fiscal sponsor. And so I didn't know if that verged into this
Well,
territory.
it gets into that murkiness, right, of like, it
Right.
arguably, you know, most Thrive grants are part of the arts ecosystem in some way and would not exist without venue partnerships, you know.
Yes.
So it can get really messy.
Right.
And so to your point, I mean, we want to be as clear as possible. We want to give people opportunities to talk about it, but from a policy question, it, you know, to Commissioner Lefkowitz's point, if y'all have some further example scenarios that come up for you, some wording, we welcome it because it is something that as we work on the resource guide, we want to be clear.
And I just want to, I think a tricky thing is some of these things have like submission fees to organizations for artistic work, and we don't, saying this because it came up a lot last year. We don't prohibit that, right? But I think that's one example that gives appearances of what we're talking about as well.
I think too, like any, in the I know the resource guide, you're probably like, oh my gosh, everything's going on there, but like having scenarios or examples of what would an appropriate kind of clarifying relationship, and just in general with fiscal sponsors, what's an appropriate, what are possible scenarios? And I know you have the documents there that they can upload and like suggested things, but the relationships are different, right? And so possible scenarios for what would be appropriate and not, I guess.
Yes, I think
Like
like
just a scenario.
when we describe relationships, types of relationships, on the one end, it's like receives money, cut check, talks to you, and the recordings do.
Yeah.
To the other end of like,
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
my mentor and coach, and we meet once a week,
Exactly.
and these other benefits, mutual benefits. from the
Exactly.
partnership, right?
Yeah. And yeah, all of that is possible, right? But thinking about clarifying that.
Are there currently or have there ever been limits to how many Thrive grants an individual can receive? They only get
You
one.
mean per year? or-
No, I mean, over time.
There is not.
And we have talked about what that might be something as we approach, like, being at the end of this
Mhm.
spirit of 3-year guidelines.
Right.
What that might look like. It's an advocacy question too, really, of like
Right.
funding and capacity and looking at many, many other examples. There are a lot of funding sources that do put limits on, you have to wait 2 years or something like that. We don't currently do that. And that was not something that I felt comfortable changing about a community process, but it is percolating amongst the many questions.
Just because we've had such an explosion in applications for these, and
Yep,
then
absolutely.
and many moons ago, when I received the individual artist grant through Tennessee Arts Commission, that was a one and done, can't get any. So I was just curious.
Can't get it again ever.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. One of the examples that I liked called encouragement points.
Mhm.
So an encouragement point, if you have not received a Thrive grant in the last 3 years, you get 3 points on your application, right? So it's getting at the same thing, but it's not prohibiting anything.
Gotcha.
Back to that book chapter thing though, too, like, some
Right.
people might be doing a cycle of things, and if
Couple
that,
of
maybe
times.
like you could get 3 years, but then that's it, or something, so. I have one other thing I wanna bring up, which I don't wanna bring it up, but I'm gonna bring it up, because you're
Bring it
tired of me bringing it up. But, and we can't do anything about this right now, but I just wanna keep mentioning it, because it's on our list, but the AI stuff is gonna be a thing, with this, and, I mean, in terms of, I've just been talking to people, right? And the clarifying language about what, like the deliverable, the producible, the role of, that, and this is for the future, not
Yeah.
for this, but
And
I just.
I
keep
have something I can say that may help with.
Well, and I also want to say, I think we should anticipate, I don't know if we should anticipate questions. Maybe someone wouldn't ask a question about it, but I bet people are thinking about it, in terms of even like an application. Can you use AI to?
I'm
Go ahead.
gonna send you an email I have shared in that we haven't gotten to fully dive into, but there was a survey done of a lot of arts funders and agencies around AI, and I have some good things I can share. We could maybe send the link in the follow-up. But I also just want to say that part of the background of, as we thought about rubric criteria, there are many questions where if you can't talk about how you're doing this in community, so how do you know this is something wanted and needed, and how are you making this something that helps our, Metro Arts vision for like every Nashvilleian having a more vibrant creative life, like you have to contemplate that, and so, work that may be done in AI isolation, it will have a harder time scoring a lot of the more community-centric questions that we ask in our grants. It's not perfect and we do need more, but we have something we can share.
Well,
with our-
and people are, we'll have a lot more information on this a year from now, like,
Yeah.
we'll be able to do a lot more research people are just still developing the language. I just always want to raise it because,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I did find something and we'll share it in our follow-up, which you
Mhm.
might enjoy.
yeah. Mhm. Or I might,
You may not enjoy, but at least you'll have data.
which is how I feel.
Yeah.
Okay. next
Existential
time.
stream, yeah.
Are there questions that
We can try.
you have, or I know we're not gonna vote on this today, but this is a very helpful overview, which I think should get us along, but anything else from commissioners in terms of thoughts? I'm appreciative of
Nice
this
to have a deep dive into it.
overview, but I think this is really helpful to go back and look, and thank you for printing the slides, because that just helps me.
Is
Yeah,
there,
it's a lot of paper.
is there, more or different information that would be helpful for our conversation next week as we plan for that? Where, you know, if we feel good about these, we will bring them to commission next week. Which would put us on the timeline that's laid out here. It would put us onto council next. That would put us at council on May 7th.
And just a reminder that we are not, as the committee, in terms of the, we don't know the budget, so we're not deliberating on the split between or anything like that. This is just the guidelines. So in that sense, I don't feel like I need any more data or like to review any of our charts or things like that, for these guidelines.
And the things that we've talked about today, resource guide and what should be in there, what we might think about putting in, et cetera, et cetera. We're gonna see some of that Monday when we come. Maybe.
It will not be a product that, is,
Reproducible.
We will not yet be a producible.
yeah.
This has been our producible.
Yeah.
And then the producible before that and the producible before that, like check-ins. But yeah, we love these producibles and we promise to commit to them, but yeah.
Maybe a list of the things that we've talked about, you know, that would be in there, that,
Table of contents.
a table of contents.
And I say that only because this conversation is good, just like previous conversations we've had, and then we'll have 8, 9 other people who will spark something.
Yeah,
And so it may be something that we've talked about here,
yeah,
and it may not.
yeah.
And so if, I know the handy notebook that Jackie has captured it, and I know Ashley has captured it. I'm not gonna remember all of it, but
Yeah, I agree. Like thinking about a table of contents or a list that we could.
Yep.
Say.
We were originally writing it into the guidelines and it made the guidelines unruly.
Yeah.
So that's all gonna come out.
But that exists and it, you know, there is a draft form of that exists too, that can be shared in some way, but not.
And that too can be a work in progress, you know?
Yeah.
It will be.
It will be, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of, you know, we can, everyone's asking, but we've got our like by the day work plan, so it's like the application launch period. It's very resource heavy, right? It's about what day are we recording the video, it's about, you know, are these support guidelines, support documents finalized, you know, like our draft for having them is coming up, but we're not gonna have like a final product to give you.
yeah.
Next week.
Which is good. I'm just saying, there are enough things that I think about and all the staffing issues that I'm dealing with sitting right here, that there's no way I'm gonna remember all of these things. Even when I get 50 pages from you all next month.
Yeah. Thank you for including this from Isabel. That's helpful. And a generous response.
Yeah, I think the questions, I gave my copy away, but you know, are things that, her questions are questions that we have.
We've talked about.
Surfaced with you as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think a lot of the changes to the rubric address that and the opportunity to submit more things, you know. Okay, so I can't remember where we are. Oh, our next meeting is April the 13th. That's a week from now. And maybe I'll bring us some snacks, but thank you for all of this and for preparing it and for going through it. I think it'll make next week like super thank you, navigable.
We can talk more on some guides.
Now I'm fascinated by the word producibles,
Yeah.
Right.
because I always have heard deliverables.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm gonna be thinking about the
No,
difference
same.
between a producible and a deliverable.
You know, if you want to fling any examples as they come to you our way, always feel free.
Should I take a motion?
Oh, our grant coordinator position closes tonight at 11:59.
Do you have some apps?
I'm sure we have, hundreds potentially. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't see that until probably later in the week. It all lives in HR hands for now.
Okay, great.
But
The last minute, if
We're
somebody's
receiving
waiting.
inquiries, so we know folks are applying and we're letting them know that, you know, while we're in the process, we are appreciative and if they have specific questions, but that we're actively in the hiring.
Yeah,
it's a very high interest.
yay.
Many inquiries.
Okay, so I would take a motion. Do I need a motion?
You can just, I think,
I'm just gonna end it. What I'm gonna do is end it.